My name is Paul Grandal, and I'm the director of the New York State Writers Institute. Last summer, the University Art Museum, Performing Arts Center, and New York State Writers Institute, the three arts presenters at UAlbany, discussed the idea of a collaboration to address the pandemic, racial reckoning, and cultural uncertainty. How could we plan relevant and substantive programming with lasting impact? How could we connect with our students and communities? While discussing these questions, we all felt certain that whatever we came up with, it would in some way include artists. Artists that we had worked with and presented at UAlbany, artists we admired, artists we knew were deeply invested in making sense of our world in this fraught moment. We arrived at this series, Artist to Artist, addressing this moment. Our goal is to offer collaborative programming that provides continued opportunities for student and public engagement in an online format. We hope these conversations will help shine a guiding light on difficult issues, share perspectives that could help lead to tangible solutions, and demonstrate the need for respect, empathy, and inclusivity. These things are at the core of creative works of art and are needed more than ever in today's society. I'm delighted to introduce you to Puerto Rican author Esmeralda Santiago, a founding mother of Neo-Rican literature. She's the author of 3 memoirs, including the bestseller, When I Was Puerto Rican, Almost a Woman, and The Turkish Lover, along with 2 novels and a children's book. Esmeralda visited the University at Albany in November 2018 as part of UAlbany's Creative Life series.
My name is Corinna Rips-Shamming. As Director and Chief Curator at the University Art Museum, I am pleased to introduce Shane Aslan Selzer. Shane is a practicing artist, editor of 2 books on art and curatorial pedagogies, and founding editor of Social Action Archive Committee, a networked collective of individual researchers. In her powerful commissioned project, Torch 72/2020, on view at the University Art Museum during the spring 2021 semester, she employs video, sound, collage, and archival records to explore the trajectory and lineage of intersectional justice efforts on the UAlbany campus, reactivating UAlbany's 1972 Torch yearbook, edited by then student and renowned AIDS activist Ron Simmons.
My name is Kim Engel, and I am the Associate Director of the UAlbany Performing Arts Center. I'm delighted to introduce you to hip-hop artist, break dancer, rapper, poet, musician, and composer, Rafael Xavier, a 2016 Guggenheim Fellow and an alumnus of Rennie Harris Peer Movement. Rafael is Philadelphia-based and is a professor at Princeton University. Rafael and his crew visited UAlbany in the fall of 2017 to perform Point of Interest and to offer workshops to both high school and college students over a 3-day period. And now we turn things over to our guests, who will start off their conversation by exploring these questions. In your work and your life, how are you navigating the current times in a productive, sensitive manner? How can the arts make a difference in this tumultuous world in which we are living?
Hi, my name's Shane Aslan Selzer. I'm a visual artist and teacher and parent. And I have a show at the University Art Museum at UAlbany currently called Torch 72/2020 that looks at this particular document and the archive of this document, which is the 1972 yearbook that was created by then student Dr. Ron Simmons, who went on to be a pretty prolific writer and AIDS activist. And the project looks at this document as a way of centering the history of intersectional social justice actions on UAlbany's campus from the early 1970s to the present, and uses the yearbook itself as this radical document to begin to bridge conversations between different student groups on campus today. I also, I work under this umbrella called the Social Action Archive Committee, which is a networked archive kind of collective of independent researchers. We've been working primarily with visual aids archives for the past 5 years. And I do a lot of work with their archive committee around which holds the archives of artists that are longtime survivors with HIV and artists who have passed of AIDS-related illness. So I think a lot about caretaking in the archive and how the practice can be a form of care in the relationships that it explores and encounters along the way through project work.
Now I have a lot of questions already to ask you from your work. My name is Esmeralda Santiago. I was born in Puerto Rico, came to the United States as a 13-year-old. And my work is well, I was a filmmaker for some years. I was an Indian classical dancer for about 20 years. And then in my 30s, I became a writer of books, began writing essays about my experience as a Puerto Rican woman living at the time in southern Massachusetts. And the essays then kind of expanded into a book about growing up in Puerto Rico, coming to the United States. And that one's called When I Was Puerto Rican. That's my first book, followed by 2 more memoirs, which it took me 3 books to get to the age of 25. I never thought my life was that interesting. But when you start writing, it's fascinating how much you have to tell. I'm also a novelist. I've written 2 novels, one called America's Dream and another one called Conquistadora, which is a historical book about Spaniards coming to Puerto Rico during the time when people were still enslaved and what that experience was like. I've written essays, personal essays, and commentary for NPR and that kind of thing. So I do a lot of, the one thing I don't do is poetry. I dare not, because I respect poets too much to even think that I could ever, but it's one of the things that keeps me sane. I read a poem every morning before I start working, just as a way to connect to words again, I guess. And I live in about an hour north of New York City. I was a rural child, and when we were in New York City as a family, my big goal was to get out of the city because I was very uncomfortable in being in a city. I felt like I was in a labyrinth and trapped and all the kinds of things that if you grow up out in the country free, makes it different for you to experience. So that's in a nutshell who I am, what I do, where I live. And I'm very much looking forward to our conversation and the kinds of things that we will be talking about. And so, Raph, it's nice to meet you.
Indeed. You guys make me feel like there should be somebody else in my spot with bigger things. Rafael Xavier. I'm originally from Wilmington, Delaware. I moved to Philly in 1998. Ironically, as a photographer, and just from having a background in dance. Rennie Harris, who runs Rennie Harris Pure Movement out of Philadelphia, a pioneering hip hop concert dance artist, asked me if I was interested in doing a hip hop version of Romeo and Juliet. And so when I got into that, all the things that I had in my head as a creative person just came to life. I just needed a spark to see that it's possible to do, because I didn't know. I was just doing things, a photographer, a writer, rapper, dancer, visual artist, like all these things I didn't know what to do with. And so eventually I got into creating dance for the theater, and that's been my thing ever since the past, maybe 22, 23 years, seriously, consistently. I use breaking to create as the number one tool or vocabulary to create narratives for the theater in a way that people haven't done, or audiences haven't seen the dance done in that way. It's associated with street and the youth, and so you have a grown person, a mature man who's still doing this stuff in a different way. I think it's attractive to the audiences. So my work now, for a long time now, so probably since the beginning 20 years ago, has been to show what it looks like as a grown man, like the maturity of this form on stage. Who am I speaking to now? What am I creating? Why am I creating it? What does it mean to be an adult in the hip hop form that's associated with youth? And so all the things that I do now as a writer, photographer, visual artist, musician, it all goes into creating the work that I can, disseminate all this information about maturing in this form, whether it's aging body, the concepts, creating concepts that speak to me as an adult, speak to the audience as an adult. So all these things are wrapped up in how I'm, why and how I create work for the stage.
That's fascinating. I immediately connected to the question or the concern as a dancer as you get older. How does dance change for you as a dancer? Because of course there are physical issues that you have to deal with as a dancer, and I'm curious because my experience for breaking from watching it, I wouldn't, I was too old to even try it to do it. But my experience from watching is that it's just so physical, and it's just it's so physically aggressive with the floor and with the air and so on. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how your approach to dance itself as your body is different. How does that?
In 2013 or 14, I noticed that my physicality of being able to spin was declining, and it wasn't like during a practice that I noticed it. It was like during a performance when I noticed, oh wow, something's not working right. And I know I kept it to myself. So I was like, well, I can't do this 5 times. I'll just do it until I can't, like maybe 2 times, just cut it in half. Excuse me, up to that point, I thought a lot about when you watch dancers dance in a circle, most of the time their solos or their freestyle was probably 45 seconds to a minute. So for me, it was, how do I take that 45 seconds to a minute and expand that over a 60-minute time period? And so I was cutting things in half. I was repeating it, slowing it down. All the tools that had been in theater for other dance forms were now accessible to me. I had access to the same things. So as a hip hop dancer, most people are going to be like, no, I don't want to do that. That's not real. That's not where we come from. We can't. And I was like, well, it's already there. Let's utilize these things. So when I started noticing how my body was changing, I went deeper into those tools of repetition, spatial awareness, the tempo, keeping different time signatures, and breaking down, going back to and breaking down the elements that created it in the first place. For example, I have jazz musicians friends, and I notice every morning, like when we go out to places or if I'm in a hotel with them, they practice the same scales every morning religiously. I don't do that. Like a lot of dancers I know don't do that. We go right to the big stuff. Like what can we do that we were doing right to the big stuff?
Yeah.
Because the movement foundation is ignored as technical prowess. If it's not big spins and flips, we don't want to look at it. We don't even want to do it because it's not acknowledged. So I did what a musician does. Let's go back to all of that early stuff and let's play with that. Let's fine tune it. Let's take our time and explore and investigate why these movements make up the big movements. And so I started putting that stuff on stage. The early elements of the dance for me was very complicated in the early stages. And it's still complicated when I teach my students. So I went back to that. I went back to the small parts and started playing with the music. So now the audience gets to see these things in a pace that they could understand. Because when it's going really super fast, you just go, oh, that's great. But you don't know what happened. Yeah. So now slowing that down and giving it to the audience in that way gives them an appreciation for the movement, probably for the first time they've ever seen it, right? So it's new again, it's fresh again, even for me.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I think of Shane's work in archives, and until really the 20th century, it was impossible to really archive dance because it was an ephemeral art. You know, they had drawings of the costumes perhaps, and then of course the choreography is passed down from one dancer to the other, but of course each dancer changes it because according to their body, their musicality, whatever. So it's just very interesting to think in terms of the work that you do, Shane, which is, you know, to archive, to preserve information, stories, art, history. And I love the what you said about, you know, archiving is part of the care of what you're doing. And that was fascinating. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the archive, first of all, it points immediately to like whose stories are archived, how are they archived, what's being told. And I think the archive can contain radical acts of love. It can also contain explicit evidence of violence and cruelty. And I've had the privilege to do some work with the archivist and curator Kat Chairs. And she has this concept that the body is the archive, which I think really applies to both of your practices in a way that I'm thinking about, like particularly during the pandemic. And Raph spoke to it in going back to your toolkit and pulling from the toolkit, like what you know in the body. And then I think Esmeralda's also, I'd love to hear more from you about how that shows up in the writing, like how you're pulling from stories that are already sitting in your body, some of them trauma, joy, pain, and pulling them forward into a translation, right, into written words. But it's something I keep going back to, particularly as a parent, like what sits in the body, what's inherited and passed, and how do we move through it? And how can I be part of a process of repair in that process, you know, in this thing living.
Right. And yeah, it's really interesting for me. I grew up in rural Puerto Rico. And so I was like an active kid, you know, climbing trees and running and that kind of thing. So I did not have a dance class until I was 14 years old when I got to high school. My very first dance class was already started. Some of these dancers had been doing it since they were 4 years old. But I think my physicality as a kid who grew up outdoors on a tropical climate allowed me to be fearless with my body in a way that I think as a dancer you need. You really do need to have confidence in your ability of your body being able to move. And children do it naturally, unless we start telling them, don't do that, you're going to fall,
Yeah.
or don't do that, you're going to break something, or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think if you don't stop a child from moving, I think they learn their bodies, and they learn what's possible in their bodies, given the body type and so on and so forth. And so I think that was something that when I went to the first dance class that I went to, it wasn't terrifying to me. I was actually noticed that I was doing things that some of my cohorts didn't do. They were not dancers either. They couldn't do it because they had grown up in New York City in apartments, and basically they could walk and they could run very fast. But in terms of some of the other movements that I was familiar with as a kid, climbing trees for a mango or an avocado or whatever, it was a completely different approach to my body, where I was not self-conscious, I guess is the way to put it. And I think maybe Raf might have noticed with some of your students is, if you're not self-conscious of your body, then you can try any crazy thing and you're not afraid to do it, But I think that we actually stop children from being comfortable in their bodies by telling them about the things that they should not do, rather than giving them the opening to do anything with their one instrument that they have that requires nothing else.
Yeah.
So I think that was my experience at, becoming a dancer. But it's very interesting. I became a writer after my body just said, Indian classical dance, very intense. You have 2 kids. I had to find another way to express the archive in my body, really, and what I had stored in my experiences. And so I began to write as a way to express something within me that my body no longer was able, or I was not willing to, or I just didn't have the space in which to do it, because I was raising children. I had a business. I had to make a living, as you may have guessed, you don't really make a living as an Indian classical dancer in Boston, So all these kinds of things kind of drove me to seek for another art form. And I end up being a writer, and really mostly because I was a reader. I was very physical as a person, but I also love to just sit by myself in the quietest place I could find and just read and be completely submerged. So that's where I think one thing morphed into the other. And I think in terms of the pandemic thing for me, I work alone. I work in an office by myself. My life didn't really change substantially with all the closures, because I live in the country, so I can always get outside into nature, which I need. And then the rest of the day I'm indoors anyway. And so it was very poignant for me, for my friends who were really captured in their spaces because they couldn't go. It was very poignant for me, and I felt sorry for them that they couldn't do that, and many people actually found a way to to leave the cities because of that, because they needed it. So, and of course, you couldn't invite your friends to come stay with you. I mean, you couldn't even you couldn't share your life with your friends in so many other ways, but this was one thing that we could have shared. We couldn't do it. So it was painful, to not be able to do that. And then to see, to see the artists who need an audience, a dancer, a singer. I mean, you're an artist, you need somebody to look at your work, and all of a sudden you don't have that. That also, I found it very poignant and sad for me. I mean, it takes me a long, long time for me to write a book, and then it feels like longer for the publisher. So I'm used to that long delayed gratification, but I couldn't, I remembered as a performer how much you get from the energy of the people around you. And I have a lot of friends who are artists or painters and sculptors, and for them it's delightful to observe how people respond their work. And then they couldn't do that. And that really did a thing on me that I hadn't thought about at all, and made me think and feel something different.
It really resonates for me what you're saying about the ways that your practice showed up for you during this time, and the ways you're able to rely on and pull from this discipline that you've created over many years, that actually is like a way that you can thrive when things are really difficult. And I felt a lot of that too, like constantly turning to the practice and maybe needing to shift things due to circumstance, but still really depending on the practice every day to help me stay curious and open and looking and observing what's going on in this time with that lens that is a curiosity lens and not just a panic lens.
Yeah. Interesting.
I'm curious from Raph though about how that manifests with dance, because I think it's much different, this question around audience and other dancers and collaboration.
Yeah, I was going to relate something to what Esmeralda said earlier. I had worked on a show that I thought every time I do a show, I feel like it has to be better than the next one, right? Otherwise, it's not interesting, right? And in terms of better, in whose terms, who's meaning better, right? So me as a creative person, I want to do something I didn't do every show, and so this show felt like that. It was the maturing jazz musicians, the relationship between African American street improvisational forms with the dancers. I mean, I felt like this is it. This is going to be the thing. 2 years I work on this show. The day we go out, the weekend we're about to go out is Monday a year ago, right? And I'm like, we were on our way to Connecticut, and the presenter was like, if you guys come up here, I'm afraid they're going to shut the city down, so you shouldn't even come. So the guys were at my house, a couple of them from California, they were at my house, and we're sitting around, and we're like, yo, what do we do? They're saying we can't go outside. You guys' flights have been canceled. Like we're stuck. Everybody's stuck. And for the first time, I felt like, it's a little emotional because it's the first time I felt like it was out of my control. I couldn't do anything because as a child, even when your parents tell you you can't go outside, you find something to do, right? There weren't that kind of video games and telephones and all. You found something to do. So now here I am as a grown man, and I'm being told I can't go outside, and I'm at home, but I'm going, that's not right. Like something's wrong here. Something is absolutely wrong in a way that I've never experienced before. And so I didn't want, it might be a little selfish, but I didn't want the guys in my house. I didn't want to listen to them. I didn't want to have those kind of conversations about what do we do now? What are we going to do for money? Like what happens? Do we still get paid? What's going to happen with the show? I didn't want to hear any of that. I needed to figure out what I was going to do in this moment where I can't do anything. So long story short, after they went home, I sat and ate bags of popcorn and tasty cakes and Pringles and just like getting fat, right? Because I didn't know what to do and I was feeling bad and super down. And I went to writing. And I was like, well, let's just write. Let's just sit here and write. Let's do something. Can't go outside? Let's write. And I started writing just some a story about whatever was going on in my life in the summer that had passed, and it took me away from the dance for the time I needed, right? Then all of a sudden, I started looking at the dance, the show that I'd been doing, and I was like, that was way too much for you to do. I'm glad that this happened because now I can start all over again, right? Because you make these works, you make these projects, and you know when you're over your head, but you keep right on going, right? So the pandemic at first was really stifling, but it also was a moment to reflect on what I had been building over those 2 years, and got to a point that allowed me to look at things in a way that was critical.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't look at my work critically, I just do it, and everyone else might look at it critically. So it was a time for me to look at the work I had created in a critical way, pick it apart, and feel like, okay, maybe that wasn't a smart work for you to make right now. Like, it was super ambitious. And so I left it alone. Everyone kept saying, well, maybe this was in March. So maybe we'll be all right in April. No. Maybe we'll be all right in June. No. Maybe we'll be all right in October. So the presenters kept pushing things further out. Nothing happened all year. And for me, I kept going, good. Let's do something else, right? Every time something got canceled, I was like, yes, that's a meaning. There's something there. I need to embrace that. Not look at it anymore like, oh, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I can't dance. I can't perform. It's like, okay, do what you used to do. Do what you're good at. Do something else, right? Use the space and time. Use those reflection periods to go into a new direction that will allow you to get back to that creative space. And it didn't have anything to do with, I wasn't trying to do anything that had to do with the pandemic. I wasn't going to write, and at that time, you guys know, racism was at an all-time high.
Right.
Like, politically, it was people were destroying things. They were upset. They weren't in their right minds. It just was not a good time at all. So we were dealing with 3 different pandemics, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to use that as fuel to create anything. To me, I felt like it was, for me personally, it was false fuel. Because the thing that I had always drew from were my personal experiences and imagination. And with those things sitting in my lap like that, it was tugging on my imagination because reality kicked in. And when you have reality and imagination, usually reality will outweigh all of that stuff, especially when you have people around you who are affected by that reality. So there's no time to be imaginative and creative. You have to be serious. So I kept pushing that stuff away and pulling on my imagination, my imaginative creativity to get something fresh. And again, I had friends around me that were like, yo, let's go march. Yo, let's go throw some rocks through let's get Palestinian on it, right? Let's do some destructive things like everyone else. And I was like, nah. I'm going to sit here and figure out something else to do. So when all this is over with and the floodgates go down, I'm off to the races, right? So I didn't use the pandemic as fuel in that way. I used it as moments to find clarity and reflection that would get me in a place to be creative during that time, and when things open up again, I'm off. I'm just out. There's no hesitation. Well, what do? I got to get back. I got to panic to put this together. But nope. I'm going to be neatly packed in these boxes where I could take a box out. And how about that? You don't like that? Okay, I have another one. Let's slide that one out. And you know what I mean? That's what I was doing.
Fascinating.
That's how I dealt with that whole thing.
That's, I mean, I think, each artist finds their way to reach to their artistic core in moments of, let's call it stress. I started speaking Spanish to myself, and then I said, wait a second, sorry. So yeah, that when we are in a moment of stress, even if we're not aware of it, but the idea of, if you had known that it would be a year in which you would not be able to be with your friends, you might actually not have wanted them to leave, kind of thing, where, because then you would have had your crew there, you got your musicians, a bunch of other dancers, you would have created a whole other thing. So it's actually makes you pivot, really. And that's the thing that's great about having a creative mind, is that you can pivot very quickly. I'm just curious about, Shane, how your work changed since the pandemic, because you're also, you work on your own, right? Or do you collaborate with,
I mean, I collaborate a lot, and also I work really in a slow kind of research way. And I really, in the beginning of the pandemic, I mean, Raph talking kind of took me back to those days last March. And I live in Brooklyn, and the energy just, things really turned and got really hot and really panicky really quickly. And schools shut down. And yeah, I remember seeing this other mom in my kid's class, and she and her husband were like in their SUV with all their belongings, and they were like driving away, and I haven't seen them since. Like, there was this feeling of like, wow, I felt pretty panicked. And it took a couple months for me to kind of find my own center again. I mean, I was pretty scared about losing my teaching job, and all the things, all the things. But what kind of pulled me through that was my kid, who was 7, spent that time, that he really learned to read that spring, like to become a real avid reader, and like just seeing that struggle and then that reward and seeing it open up into this like whole other worlds was really powerful. He like lost both his front teeth and learned how to swim, which had been like a real struggle for him. So it was like seeing like that a child's development and like creative energy was still flowing and just pushing ahead, like in this very normal timeline, it really helped me to just be like, okay, things are still, this is still our life. We're still in it. So I can't like put it on pause and panic over in the corner over here while all these things are still going on, and then once I kind of realized that, I really needed to start with just a commitment to daily practice, which if I get out of the practice of like hitting my yoga mat every day, and like you said, reading a poem in the morning, which is also something that I do. It only takes like 3-4 days for me to feel like, wow, when did I ever have that practice? Like, it's so fast that I feel like it falls away. And so I just need to remember that each morning. And that has really helped me. The fact that archives, the New York Public Library, like I was working with the archives at the Schomburg during the shutdown, they had to switch to digital, and they had to kind of think through things pretty quickly. And so the librarians I was working with, they want to be generous with researchers, but they also want to be careful about like giving giving documents over. And so there was this interesting moment of kind of thinking through with archivists, like what's the way to proceed ethically?
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's really interesting because it brings up, for me, I'm during when the pandemic started, I was writing a historical novel. And of course, I'm writing about Puerto Rico. And so there's just not as much material as if I were writing about, something happening in the United States in the same period of time. So, but I have noticed that a lot of the places, archives have had to go digital to make it available. And I have discovered, I am so thrilled that I'm finding so much more material that I need and that I can't, of course, I would have gone to Puerto Rico at a certain point. I keep notes of what I need to know more information about or confirm dates or whatever. So I had my whole list of that, but all of a sudden I'm realizing I'm actually finding this stuff online. And I'm so grateful to those librarians and those research librarians who understand that, that information belongs to all of us, really, if we need to find it. And of course, there are some things that they must keep because maybe they're delicate to digitize, whatever reasons. I don't even question it. But I'm so grateful that my ability to do my work was actually helped by this situation, because all of a sudden this information, the keepers of the information realized, what's the point of having it if I can't share it with the people who need it? And so it was just a completely different thing, so when we think of being in this pandemic, all the awful things that have happened, all the people have died, all the people who have been really, really sick and fortunately have recovered, but still are suffering from, side effects. There's all that, and of course we're all aware of it, but then there's also that side of it, that knowledge, all of a sudden, the keepers of knowledge realize, oh, wait a second, I have to, we have to find a way to reach that audience or those readers or those researchers or writers or whoever. We have to make it available, and so I felt that as a positive thing for me, that I now, of course I would love to go to Puerto Rico anytime, but I don't have to do that anymore, because if I have a question immediately, I can go online and I'm able to, sometimes it's like, it's like this, but I finally get to enough information to continue with my work. And I think that was actually a positive aspect of it. And I think the whole concept of archiving our history is so important. And I think maybe people are becoming more aware of the importance of that. People who are going into ancestry sites, looking at the history of their families, or as a dancer, looking at videos going back to whenever they started, taping performances. That all of a sudden, we do have it in our bodies. Of course, we have a lot of it, but a lot of it we don't have. We just have questions, and now we're able to find them, and that to me, I'm so happy that in a way I'm just really, it needed. I think it needed to bring attention to those people, to the keepers of our history and the keepers of our archives and the keepers of the information that usually, we kind of assume it's there, maybe we'll get to it, but now you can do it over breakfast, it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, for both of you, you guys have the classic preservation tools, like, writing and archiving. They're hand in hand. The thing with dance is, because it's dance, you can't get the same feeling from a video that you do in person. It doesn't. It's nice to watch, but emotionally, while you're there, there's a disconnect, right, with video. But I remember reading something, Esmeralda, from you. It was about your mother and welfare, and the person would come to the house. It kept pulling me in. Like, I was like, wow, right? You could. It's made for that. Even preservation, and it's made for that, because when you're studying, you reference those things.
Mhm.
But there's something that's not there yet for dance, to the physicality. There's something not quite there for dance that has always been there for writers.
Mhm.
How is it that I don't know how to ask the question. What I'm getting at is, now there's an oversaturation of dance online because of what's happening. So everybody's just throwing all kinds of dance online, and it kind of, you get numb to it. But because writing is, and documenting, literally, it's always meant for that. It has always been there. So we can go there and we can get the same thing that we've been getting, and because of the pandemic, we get even more. Like you said, your son is an avid reader now because of that, because it's always been there. But you're not going to get an avid dancer now, and that kind of person who studies dance in that way, because it doesn't come off that way, right? So I don't know how to ask this question. What I'm getting at, here I go again. What I'm getting at is there a way that we can take the emotion that went into creating a dance during the pandemic and hold on to it or archive it, and see that what it was like for that person to create that work? I can't read it, but if I watch it, I'm amused and I see what that person did, but is it beneficial?
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
It's because dance is such an ephemeral art. I think that's what makes it so important for us, because you see a dance perform, even if it's choreographed to the hills, like Swan Lake, every performance is different, regardless of the fact that it's been danced for, I don't know how many hundred, 100 years at least, right? So, so I think that is such a different, the only thing I can connect it, and maybe Shane can talk a little bit more about it, is conceptual art, which also it's ephemeral, it happens, or most of it anyway. It can happen in that moment and can only happen in that moment, and that's, I think that's what makes, for those of us who love dance, is that you can't repeat it, you can't, there's just no way, the dancers energy level on that day, what they ate that day, whether it's, the weather is cold or warm or humid or dry. It's always a new experience, no matter what. And so it's really, in many ways, it really is the only art that is created the moment it's performed. It can only be created in performance, I think. I'm thinking, because you prepare to dance, right? All the stretches and whatever you need to do, but it's not until you actually do it that the art happens. And then it only happens for that moment, and it cannot be duplicated. You can try, but you never can. This is,
yeah.
I think that's what makes it so different, and I think it's so poignant when I look at videos of ballet dancers trying so hard to maintain their bodies in shape during this closed time, in which they're not able to go to their 3-hour bar lessons with the masters or whatever, and they have to do it on their own, and even years and years and years of training, you still need a person to see your body's position and correct the things that need to be corrected as a dancer. So I think it's dance is really different in of all the arts from all the other ones that I think we can think of. And I was even thinking, like, how about singers? Well, you know, I think an opera singer or a ballad singer, so every performance is different, but there's something so much more. You can record a singer. I still can listen to Ella.
Absolutely.
And I can be with Ella in that moment. I can see a dance performance on video, and I see a performance in video. I don't have the same visceral reaction that I would have if I were there. And that's the only art that does that, really.
Yeah.
You know, and you just can't reproduce it in a way. You can only approximate it, I think.
Right.
I think it's very akin to the histories of oral tradition. So like the idea that storytelling is a living, contextual, breathing form that shifts and is shaped by the time-space continuum that it's presented within, and that there's power in that, like in being in the specifics of a time-space continuum, and that there's something potentially lost in the record or the attempt to record or document or fix with language the story.
Yeah.
So, but there's also a vulnerability, as we know, like the written word is like become law, and it has trumped the spoken word so many times historically. So there's a power, there's kind of a dynamic with dance that hinges on that power hook, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just so glad we've had this discussion about this. I had never thought about all the things that we've talked about until we started talking and listening to one another, and trying to figure out something that maybe we've all thought to ourselves, but to articulate it, you can only articulate it when the right questions are asked. Right. And but I think we're probably going to be closing, but one of the things that I wanted to ask, you know, I when I go out and I talk to my readers and people who come to my presentations, they always wanted to know, how did you start doing what you did? You know, so I've talked a little bit about how I was a dancer and then I became a writer, and you're a dancer and you just naturally flowed into it. But Shane, can you tell us a little bit about how you entered into your the work that you're doing right now? How did that happen?
Well, it's a really good question. I don't know if I have the answer to it.
It's very specific. I mean,
it's a really
the occupation is so very specific. You know, that it really made me think about how does
well, I mean, I'm always interested in pedagogy and forms of learning, and for me, artwork is about connecting, and so connecting, you know, in the archive are the ancestors. So connecting in that way across death has been really rewarding for me. And then it's helped me to also connect back to younger people, to have a way of sharing this legacy of work. I've never felt like it's not about my great idea. I've never felt like the kind of artist that was like, my story needs to be told or my idea needs to get out there, but more, how can I be of use in pulling forward things that can help us together in repairing the world. I mean, that is a driving thing for me, is repair, which is ongoing.
Yeah. I mean, things break all the time. So,
yes.
You know, that is the most likely thing, rather than to, you know, that many more things in the history of human life have broken than have been preserved. So it's kind of interesting. I mean,
I think I wanted to in closing, like to hit on what Esmeralda had said, that you start every day with a poem. And I started this morning with the poem Blink Your Eyes by Sekou Sundiata. And I watched a performance of it on YouTube by a young person, like an 8-year-old, Bryce Ware, which I've read the poem and seen the poem performed many times, but had never seen it performed by a child. And it was a completely different poem that gutted me in a fresh way.
Wow, that's interesting. I mean, to take the written word and make it into dance is something that it's very close to my heart. My graduation thesis was an Indian classical dance interpretation of the Bible's The Song of Songs, using Indian classical dance. And instead of music, I had people reading the poem. And one of the things in my life that, when people often ask me about regrets, and
Writing's not.
This is the first time I've ever thought about it, is that that I have no images of those performances. It happened. People, I know 2 people who saw me dance in my dancing years, but it's really, when you mentioned that, it brought back to me that joy of not only have created that dance and that performance, but the joy of that audience at the end, appreciating all the work that I had done to make it possible for them to be there. And this is something that you don't get as a writer. Your book is out there, and you don't meet your readers unless you're invited to something like this, or you go out, and that was the other thing about, this pandemic, how awful it is for a performing artist, is that you have lost the energy of your audience, and and you feed on that as a performer. So it's
yeah.
But maybe in its place, the pandemic has created a longing in the audience, because I mean, you hear everyone talk about a return to dance above like all else.
Yeah.
Not just in the dance community. It's like the essential worker of the arts.
Yeah, Bill T and his company they figured out a way to, still give the audience and their subscribers and their fans, followers, a place to still see dance. Like they used the lobby of their of New York Live Arts, where people could stand outside and watch through the window, and the artists were inside. And he has a thing at the Armory now where I think, what's the name of it? Awkwardness, where it's in the Armory and everyone is super spaced out. So it gives a new design to the space. The structure of the performance space and the audience now become one. So you're right there, they're not next to you, but they're next to you. And so they're part of the performance. The performance is in front of you. So I feel like he's given the audience and performers a brand new place to speak of what dance is now. And this thing has opened us up to a lot of people up to be what is not ingenuitive, be more genius in their way of creating dance now. And I'm excited to see what people are doing. For me, maybe I missed that push to go into a new direction with dance, or maybe I didn't. But in any case, through this whole thing, I've managed to, get back on my creative horse and do some things that felt good to me. And I'm looking forward to everything opening back up again.
And I think that in this terrible times, we have a responsibility as artists to continue to create, to preserve, to archive, and to present the humanity of who we are, And so I think how difficult it has been for artists. I mean, it's been difficult for everyone, but for artists, we have had to make a decision that we are going to continue to do our work through all this awfulness that's been happening. We have made that decision that we have to continue doing that, because that's who we are, and that's what humanity expects from us. Whatever is left after the apocalypse is only going to be the works of art that we left behind, whatever they may be. And I think I really appreciate that as artists, both of you, and I appreciate myself for having stayed true to that we have to do that. We can't give up. We just can't give up, because humanity needs us, basically. So,
and we owe it to ourselves, definitely. Yeah. So I think our time is almost up, but I want to say, thank you guys for this conversation, and great to meet you. I'm definitely going to look into more of what you do, and Esmeralda held the conversation down like it was her show, like she did that. Like,
I'm sorry. I'm an old lady.
That was a good thing. Like, you brought it in and then shot it back out. I was like, damn, this is her talk. Like, that felt great, because I didn't know what to do. It wasn't gonna be me. I was super nervous. I didn't know what to ask. So you did the thing. So thank you for that. And again, thank you both for your conversation. This was very, very enlightening.
Yeah, I feel energized. Thank you both so much. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, I was really very much looking forward to our conversation, and I and I just still have so many questions for you both, because I think some of the issues that came up and some of the questions that came up are important and necessary to be discussed. And I really want to thank the Writers Center for organizing this and doing this for their students and for the public. I think that's a wonderful thing, and thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.